dissociative panic. So we're about a week and a half out from that, and I'm just having conversations with her, helping her to explore what material might be wanting to come forth and be of value, so that this experience doesn't turn into and oh my gosh, ayahuasca is this awful thing, and cannabis is also awful, because this is a place where these things can go. Is if we have an experience that's traumatic or difficult to interpret or integrate or understand, it can get boxed up as like a nasty thing, and that is like very far from what we're trying to do in our mission with integration. Is even if something's difficult, it doesn't mean that it's bad. And what is the lesson in that, and what are the series of lessons that might unfold over time? Maybe you don't drink ayahuasca alone anymore. Maybe there's a reason for particular containers, particular diets, both food-wise and sex-wise, that are practiced to help hold the container, so that the preparation, part of preparation is planning for integration. So it's not about like, okay, yeah, I'm going to go like do the ceremony this weekend, then I'll like show up and go to work Monday and like go to the soccer game and all this stuff. People tend to get dysregulated by that, and that's dangerous. And that can be dangerous to individual psyches and also to collective psyches. So, yeah, I think I'll stop there.
Thank you.
Any questions over here?
I have a question.
Hello? It's about integration. And those who are not addressing that, I mean, it is considered a class 1 substance across the room, so we can't really have a legal definition around integration, yet integration is 80% of the work. It really is, no matter what substance or plant you're using. And yet people who are carelessly approaching this without any education, I mean, in your own experience, the very first time when you came across it, and you're probably pretty sleepy, and then to look back and go, wow, what just hit me? What is it, and what information do we need to put out there in order for people to properly address integration?
Well, I think it's happening little by little. It's not happening quickly, but it is happening. I remember when we started this conversation 4 years ago, integration was kind of like, oh yeah, integration. And now it seems like people are becoming more aware of it, and we're learning from people, and there are people all over the US that are contacting us about this. And I think there's a Visionary Convergence conference that's happening this weekend in LA, and it has quite a few speakers, and I believe that Sita, who's running it, was saying that's kind of the hot topic right now, is this topic of integration. So it is happening slowly and surely. People are starting to do the research on it. People are starting to present these ideas. And I think we're going to be doing a little trial and error probably for the next 3 to 4 years, because we're still kind of lost in this. But that's why we need as much research, I think, as possible. Yeah.
We have some predecessors, Timothy Leary, Ralph, and a few other folks, Dennis Groff, who have come across this, starting with the set and setting and going into, education first. I know that works for some of us, sending out invitations with information, making this general statement. The government's not going to make this legal anytime soon. That we know. But we know that if we take care of each other in community and help each other out, not just by, the hierarchy kind of model doesn't work anymore, but with the holarchy, is that correct? The holarchy, we can approach this so that people do get taken care of. Nobody's holding on to all the information, but, in order to get past this, we have to go around the establishment probably like a weed, which we're doing pretty well since we wrecked ourselves in the 60s, but we have a lot of things that are in place for us now.
I want to speak to a few things. First is that, Larry and Jahan and I are of a generation that was not, at least in this body, alive in the 60s. So we missed out, but maybe we were there. And there are lessons and good and bad and difficult and beautiful that were learned through those times and through the work that Stan Groff did, starting with LSD research in the 50s and whatnot. And so there are lots of elders and people to look up to and to resource. Ralph, you named a few people. And we are in touch with them, and we do reach out to them. I'm very blessed to call some of these people personal friends at this point in my life, and I can have conversations. I can call Jim Fadiman and talk to him about the LSD research he was doing in the 60s. So, we're fortunate to have people that we can draw upon, and there is still a lack of cohesion amongst generations, and there's interest in it from both sides for sure, but there's a lack of complete cohesion. There's a lack of maybe time. I don't know. People have a lot of stuff that they're trying to do, but we, I think as individuals, I speak for all of us, but also as ERIE as an organization, we're really trying to bridge that gap and to try to draw upon the wisdom of the elders. So we recommend that people read things like Jim Fadiman's The Psychedelic Explorer's Guide, for example, which really, it's like there. Think about these things: setting, dose, quality of your medicine, the container, the sitter, the guide, the situation, what you're walking into on the other side, preparation, integration. Read Stan's work. Read these people, see their talks, go hear them talk, look at their YouTube videos. And also, several of us within ERIE decided that we would just take a stab at it. So we put together something that we call the Integration Guidelines, which is on ERIE's website. And it's just one offering. It's not perfect, but it's an offering where we've tried to distill wisdom from different cultures, different elders, into something that we hope is usable for people, and we hope will evolve and grow, and that will have input. And so it's accessible right there on the website, and it talks about, basically breaks things into 3 phases. So preparation, during, and after, integration. So we're not trying to advocate for the use of psychedelics. We are saying, though, if you happen to choose to use psychedelics or entheogens, here are some things to consider that might help to optimize your experience so that it is potentially as beneficial as it can be, not only for you, but also for the community you're going home to. Because if you come home from Peru or Warrior Ayahuasca weekend in Sebastopol and you're totally wrecked, that's going to have an impact on your family, on your friends, on your community, and it's going to give that work a bad name. But if you can come back from that, having put some things in place, set yourself up so that maybe you can land in a low stimulation environment, spend some time in nature, get some body work, have a cuddle session with your best friend, journal, do some art, finger painting, whatever you need to do, it's probably going to optimize the chances that the insights and the material that you accessed in that experience or experiences is going to be incorporated into your life in a beneficial way. So that's really what we're trying to do. And one of our visions is that by having a 501c3, we will be able to have some funding come in where we can actually establish a center so that we can have perhaps a venue, maybe 2 or 3 times as large as this, and host more educational events where people can come and learn, and we can collaborate, and we can also have what we think of as a creative integration station, where people can come and express themselves through art and movement and dance and countless other ways to support them, to be supported in their integration process, and also have integration specialists and maybe therapists and maybe doctors and other researchers on hand that can all work together in a team to help this process move forward. So that's part of our vision, and that's what we're trying to do. And please read the integration guidelines. Know that it's a starting working document and that we want your input. If there's things that you've done that have helped you or that haven't helped you, we want to know. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Another question over here, unless someone's...
So I appreciate the diversity that's been presented tonight in regards to topics. I'm interested with Jahan said some very interesting things around evolution of consciousness, and in particular just how our current community, the psychedelic entheogenic community in the West, really represents a new emerging wisdom tradition, we could say, around the intelligent evolved use of these kind of medicines. But this work is still absolutely radical, and a lot of us are considered fringe people for participating in it. Can the 3 of you, and maybe Jahan, kind of place this in context, how can we actually be openly exploring these things so that we create a cultural shift that will be followed by a structural shift?
Well, one that we are doing it. It is happening. The steps are taken. This is an event that is publicly known out there. So people are seeing that these things are valid. A lot of respectful people are doing it. I've just even in my own development coming forward to saying like, hey guys, I use psychedelics through their Facebook, my family. I'm credible. All these things. It moves us into seeing that these our potentials that we can use for further development for ourselves and our species. I think the context is being created, like I think this idea of like the transformative festivals, it's like this blinking light that we go to, but it's becoming stronger and stronger and stronger. At one point, that light will manifest and become like solid, but we're on the shift towards that happening, so we're in a process right now. I'd say just stay with the process, trust it. We are like on this giant spaceship that is going somewhere. Just keep staying with the experience and moving with it. What at the end of the day, what is true will be revealed and will win. That's what will happen. The best parts of humanity will come out, and if these substances, as we know, these medicines have a lot to offer us, they will come forth and like their light will be shown. And it's a matter of time, but just stay with the trust that it's inevitable.
I think another thing that's important is how many people here, Psychedelic Society SF, know who Daniel Jabor. So Daniel Jabor, one thing that he would always talk about is the importance of coming out of the closet, and his sort of his lens was looking at cannabis. So he was saying he had some statistic that said that people are more likely to agree with cannabis legalization if they know somebody that smokes. Not even if they smoke themselves, but if they know somebody that does, because they've sort of undemonized or de-demonized, I don't know if that's word, re-undemonized or something like that, the person and the individual, and they're no longer afraid of this cannabis, they're no longer afraid of the propaganda. They've been able to put a face to this thing. And I think in the same way, all of us individually, I know this has been something that we've been doing that's part of ERIE, is how can we come out together as a community, as a strong community that's scholarly, that's respectful, that's doing really good work, that's really like accessing the different layers of these conversations and dialogues and bring it to a larger group of people. And I think that's really the part of it. I mean, it's such a wonderful experience. I've sort of been doing this sort of mini practice where if I'm on the airplane, or if I'm walking down the street, or if I'm on the bus and somebody says, "Oh, what do you do for life?" Well, the question, what's your job? That's the typical Western question, right? What do you do for a living? I just tell them. And it's awesome to see their response, because they're not expecting me to go off on, "Oh yeah, I'm studying ayahuasca, which is this Amazonian psychedelic brew that's been used for many, many years, and it's a sacred brew that has, and they're just totally their mind is blown. And then usually the conversation oftentimes will go into their concerns about addiction, and they maybe know somebody that has opiate addictions, and then it gets in this really great conversation to talk about iboga and ibogaine and how that's successful, things they had no idea about. So it's really amazing when you give people the chance and not just assume like, hey, this person's going to judge me, but like actually give them a chance and talk to them like a real human being, like an adult, and like, wow, these people are really open to this. So I think that's also another step that we all can do individually. It doesn't have to be a big group. Each of us can hold that ourselves.
Coming out of the psychedelic closet, yeah. I actually put that on a collage I made during my second semester or first semester as a PCC student. I was like, is that what's happening? Am I coming out of this? I guess I am. I didn't even know I was in a psychedelic closet, but I'm out now. It's great. The thing I would add to that is like care. Like, think of this whole concern, opportunity, issue, however you want to frame it, as like a little newborn baby. And what would you do? You would like care for that meticulously, or like a little precious seedling. You would care for it with lots of love. And so this whole process needs a lot of nurturing. And sometimes I encounter people who have really strong opinions about, right now the agenda is moving forward under two main pushes, really, under in the medical realm and also in the religious realm. And you might not find yourself really aligned with either one of those. I didn't at first when I first came into the world of psychedelic research and like explosive interest 6 years ago. But at first I was like, I don't know about this, like, rescheduling MDMA, and then some psychiatrist is going to be able to prescribe it and blah, blah, blah. I had kind of a snarky attitude about it. And then I realized, like, that's just a pathway that's going to help open the door. And I chose to have an attitude adjustment about it. It's amazing. If you look at the research with MDMA, it's really hard to argue with. And if you are someone who knows anyone who's ever had any sort of stress or anxiety, probably nobody in this room's ever had any stress or anxiety, but let alone PTSD, I mean, that's such a debilitating condition for people that when you look at that research and you see, oh my God, people who were struggling for 19 years, now at 3, 4, 5-year follow-up studies are still showing persistent benefit, it's really hard to argue with that. And nobody's addicted to MDMA, nobody got a hole in their brain or all this other propaganda. So part of it is education, helping to dispel the myths and pointing people towards credible sources. Part of it is personal sharing. Part of it is caring for these things as you would a little baby or a little seedling. And I think a big part of it is surrender and faith. Like, we do the best that we can, and we have faith that, the light's going to come again. Magic, yes. Yeah.
Hi, my question is about naturally derived psychedelics and natural medicine, and how you think renewed interest in this will affect the sustainability of these medications, and how it will impact indigenous communities and their access to these medicines.
So this is actually a really big and important question that's happening right now. This is one thing about tonight's event, which I think is also unique, is it's probably one of the most sustainable entheogens that we have. Iboga, you have to pull the root out. That's a really, unsustainable practice. Peyote, same thing. There's a lot of these plants that when we eat it, for our experience, we're destroying major cultures. We're coming into other cultures, indigenous cultures as well. So my hopes, and I haven't fully finalized it yet, and I thought I saw Kara, maybe, okay. I thought there was somebody earlier, but we're hoping to have on our fall symposium a conversation about sustainability and ecological practices as well in relationship to these medicines, and how can we be ecologically sensitive to these different things. For example, Jonathan Dickinson, who runs GITA, which is a global ibogaine therapeutic alliance, just wrote an article on Reality Sandwich maybe about 2 months ago talking about what can we do about Iboga? Because there is this problem with, we're harvesting too much, and there's all these addiction therapy centers, and they're harvesting this Iboga for these centers, and what's left anywhere? And so they found that you can actually get some, and I could be totally messing this up, but you can get some of the basic same ingredients through something called Volcanga, which is a sustainable medicine. So how can we find different ways to access the same medicine, but maybe through plants that are a little bit more sustainable? So this is a conversation that now that we're sort of growing into this big sort of entheogenic movement, we are going to have to really figure out what are the next steps here, because monoculture doesn't work either. You have the Santo Daime, the UDB churches that grow vine, ayahuasca vine, and it's pretty much all the same vine, and then if anything comes through, it wipes it out. So we have to be a little bit more intelligent about this too, and how we harvest things as well. So it's a big question. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it brings up questions around, ecological stewardship, and also being mindful of cultural appropriation and being, mindful of indigenous cultures. Like, I feel really blessed that Julieta is welcoming, she welcomed 12 or 14 of us gringos into her home. I mean, we got to stay in her house for like the 10 days we were down there. That was probably unheard of, It wasn't unheard of 100 years ago. It was probably unheard of 70 years ago. 60 years ago, those doorways were just slowly starting to be opened. And how do we, mindfully, carefully, respectfully ask permission, perhaps, to bring these traditions into our lives? Or if they have been gifted to us in a way through someone else, how do we then give back and give offerings and pay homage to that? I think these are, I don't know that I have any answers, but I probably have more questions. And I think that it's a really important conversation. And I think that it's also important to remember that the traditions of plants and fungus, the use of plants is ubiquitous around the world. Every culture has a relationship with plant medicine and fungus medicine, if that was part of their tradition too. So utilizing nature-based remedies for healing is ingrained in us. We've evolved. There are actual receptors that have co-evolved with us, including these receptors that are responsive to DMT and serotonin and psilocybin. We have components in plants and fungus that are part of the evolutionary process. They are helping us to co-evolve. And one thing that I like to think a lot about, and then I'll stop on this, is this idea that, not only are we getting to have an amazing experience by ingesting an entheogen and navigating, various levels of reality or realms or dimensions of whatever is going on with that experience, but the entheogen, the plant, the fungus, the the synthetic chemical is getting to have an experience of what it's like to be in a human body and to navigate, through with the lens of our consciousness. So it's a co-participatory experience. It's not necessarily one-sided, and so maybe that's something that we can bring. The very first time I drank ayahuasca, I said to Mama Ayahuasca, I said, what am I supposed to do with plants? Because I was in medical school, I was completely in love with plants. I studied everything I could about herbs. I had to memorize, 300 herbs on a board exam. I mean, it was like ridiculous, and I loved it, and I spent so much time. And I said to Mama Ayahuasca, what can I do with my love for plants? And she said to me, be our advocate. And I was like, okay, and that has many forms. That can be growing a tomato plant in my yard. It can be growing herbs on the windowsill. It can be, acknowledging a plant that I walk by that's growing out of a crack in a street in San Francisco, and I can pour a little water on it. So there's lots of different ways that we can advocate for the plant community. It could be contributing to United Plant Savers. It can be, looking at initiatives to protect some of these indigenous ways and to promote the preservation and growth of these medicines. So, okay, I'll stop there. And then we have another question here.
Hi. So my question is, you suggested it was medical, or what was the other one, religious?
Medical, and so that those are two ways,
right?
not the only. But
so
two.
What if I suggested technological? Like, for example, like in a nutshell, my experience with mushrooms is, hyperdimensional, super incredible high-res graphics, just like unbelievable alien stuff, it's not from this dimension sort of thing. And if you look at sort of things like 3D graphics industry, where these guys are trying to push, the maximum number of polygons and things like that through, billions and billions of transistors, just as a suggestion, it's a bit off the wall, but not impossible. If you tell these guys like Nintendo, Sega, Sony, whoever, all these guys, look, you're sitting on arguably the best holographic technology known on this planet, and it's sitting here because you've got a bunch of assholes in Congress and so on that they don't know what they're talking about. And, admittedly, this is a bit, it's not the full truth, right? Because if you actually take these substances, it's a bit, it's incredible, right? It's more than just incredible graphics, but I'm just wondering, why can't you, this seems like something that hasn't been quite done yet. And I was wondering if you guys had any sort of thoughts along those lines, maybe other possibilities, and specifically, Jahan, is that your?
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. You said you're into physics and mathematics, so it was interesting that in your presentation you didn't really say anything about physics, mathematics with respect to the experience of mushrooms, because one of the things I thought about it and the various, the thing is that, why haven't we been able to bring anything back?
I think people have brought stuff back. I know they did a study with scientists, something where they had they put a group of scientists together and had 50 life problems in terms of what they were working with that they hadn't been able to solve. And after the psychedelic experience, something like 42% of their problems had been solved. So I think there have been giant breakthroughs in science. Computers. There's a lot that's come out of psychedelic experiences and Google. Yeah. I think it just hasn't been public. A lot of people have had to hide it, for legal reasons and social reasons, where they've gotten this insights. Recently asked a scientist came here to give a talk here about a week ago, and I asked him how his psychedelic experiences, influences theories, and actually it was quite a bit. So it has. It's just it's been behind the doors. You can't go on the news and say I had this insight on mushrooms. That's not going to happen right now.
What would happen if it did? It seems,
it's accelerating. Our culture, evolution, technology, our consciousness is accelerating pace never before. And the truth is, I think it would be unimaginable. We couldn't visualize it. Just how when you go into a journey, what happens is beyond your imagination. If that took place, it'd be beyond anything you could see, because it'd be something novel. It'd be something new. It'd be something unprecedented.
I love that question. We're pretty much at time. I just want to add one thing to it. When I mentioned the medical and the religious fronts, those just happen to be two of the main fronts that are moving things forward right now. They're not the only fronts. They're not the best fronts. They just happen to be two of the fronts. And they're two fronts that a lot of people find it difficult to argue with. So even if you're not a religious person, under the whole like Religious Freedom Act, it's hard to argue and say, no, you can't have your sacrament, whether that's ayahuasca or mushroom. There is a motion to make a mushroom church here in California. There is already, ayahuasca is sanctioned for legal use in certain religious groups in Oregon, for example, and that is in process also here in California. So it's just that those are the two fronts that are a little bit challenging to argue with, and that the legislators have a harder time arguing with too. So it's kind of like we're sliding things in under those blankets to some degree, but technology is a whole other realm it's amazing. If you look at James Fadiman's work he was doing in the 60s, I mean, he was working with scientists from Silicon Valley and giving them LSD, and they were solving problems that went on to do things like make the mouse and personal computing and internet and whatnot. So read his book and read the book What the Dormouse Said by John Markov, which is all about this and how the evolution of the personal computing industry can be largely attributable to psychedelic work that was being done. Some people attribute the elucidation of the double helical structure of DNA to an LSD session. So, some people are going to be more forward about it, some are not. But Steve Jobs had some pretty interesting things to say about it. So, Larry, do you have any closing comments since we're...
And the only last thing I would say about that is, to this date, I have never seen anyone design a technological something that has been anything like a portion of some of my ayahuasca experiences. So I look forward to that date when somehow someone figures out in technology how to represent what a plant does by just drinking it, because that to me is technology. That is indigenous technology. You're talking about putting two plants that don't grow together in the jungle together. That's technology. That's a technique. You drink that, you're in another experience altogether. You're healing things that are so much deeper than anything. So to me, I guess it's just also a level of like, what is technology? And in a sense, some of these medicines are technology. It's just a different way of looking at it. So I think it's a great conversation, and I thank everyone for coming. We're kind of getting close on time. Happy 9/20, happy fall equinox. Thank you, Jahan. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you, everyone.
You guys.
Have a wonderful night. Our next event is going to be amazing. So if anyone knows, who here knows who Richard Doyle is? Has anyone heard the term ecodelic before? No. Okay. So this gentleman, Richard Doyle, he works at Penn State, I think Penn State. Hopefully I didn't mess that up. And he's going to be talking about this kind of idea of ecodelics, but he's specifically told us, and for those of you who are CIS people, that Aurobindo is his spirit guide. So he's going to talk about on psychedelics, on Aurobindo, non-dual practice, strange loops, and the supermental. So for you CIS folks, oh, what? So be excited. It's going to happen. I'm going to put all the information. It's on our meetup site right now, but we'll start to do some promoing. It's going to be October 24th, starting at 7 o'clock. So please be here for that. And thank you again for being here tonight.